Welcome back to the Iron Sights podcast. We're here with Heather Allen. Heather, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm super stoked to talk to you. You have to me, it's a very interesting distinction of being the first female we've had on the show for the After Dark version of this, and outside of my own crew, we've shared some experiences that we've had sort of in the space of preparedness, self-reliance, firearm space, and whatnot. But you are the first lady we've had on that's been sort of solo. So I'm excited about this, and I hope you are too.
I'm very excited. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I want you to talk to us about who you are, but I just real quick so people understand like how I found you. Really, this is a social media thing, and I had been aware of you probably some months ago. I saw a couple of very interesting videos. You were doing some interesting things, which we're going to talk about. These weren't like viral videos or anything like that. It was interesting. I liked the message and how you were bringing it to the table. And then when I kind of dug into this a little bit more, I kind of found out a little bit more about you with regard to some of the interesting stuff that you have been doing, are currently doing. And I think it's super relevant to kind of current times is where we are right now. And then, I don't know, it was just very recently you sort of reached out to me maybe through one of the posts that I put up. It was like, oh yeah, we gotta chat. So I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could maybe just give us the background bio on you. And this is my line. You can start and finish wherever you want. You just have to be patient with me because I might have to interrupt you to get some of the details.
All right, let's see. I was born and raised in Long Beach, California. I went to Cal State Long Beach, graduated with a criminal justice degree. I did a little time in Honolulu, Hawaii for my internship. That was with the Attorney General's office in Honolulu. It was so much fun. And then came back, graduated, worked for the District Attorney's office in Newport Beach. I met my husband, Tyler. We have one daughter. Her name's Kyla. She just turned 15. Just started driving. Oh my gosh. And then got a job with the California Rifle and Pistol Association. And that job right there really catapulted my career into teaching basic handgun lessons, teaching concealed carry. We ended up moving to North Carolina, and I just picked all that up in North Carolina. So it's been a great journey so far.
There's a lot to that. You did a really good job of readers digesting all that, but there's a lot that kind of goes into what you were talking about. You said criminal justice. I have some level of familiarity with that. I actually started that way in college myself, way back when. But let's talk about the stuff that you were doing with the when you got to Southern California after Hawaii, and you started getting into more of the firearms, I think like legislative space is maybe the way to put it. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what was going on?
Yeah. I did reach out to a friend of mine who works for Michelle and Associates. So like I'm pretty much an NRA lawyer. Asked if they were hiring. He said, we're not, but why don't you check into the California Rifle Pistol Association? So I did interview, and I think that was the first job where they just offered me the job right on the spot. It was a really good fit, and I'm just really, really happy to have that experience. I learned a lot about not just our Second Amendment right, but constitutional rights in general.
Talk to us about CRPA and kind of the work that they do from your experience.
They do a lot. And I will say it's an organization that the money really goes to where it's supposed to go. But they help file lawsuits. They've got Duncan versus, it was Becerra, and now it's Duncan versus Bonta with the magazine capacity law. And they do trainings. They help out with, teaching everyone from youth to basic handgun to instructors, you name it. And it's all over California. They started chapters where, different cities have different chapters. They meet every month and talk about what's going on. Because there's so much, there's a lot that goes on, like just in your own city. I think people kind of tend to forget like how much your own community, what goes on. Like gun shows, for example, there's places where elected officials are trying to get rid of gun shows. So they're really big on trying to get those back, which has been great. But yeah, it was just really interesting going to the meetings and hearing people speak. Especially like when it came to the gun shows, there was one meeting where like grown men were crying. Not just one man, but it was like multiple men were like, "Do you know what you're doing? You're taking away my memories from like walking down the aisles with my grandpa holding his hand." So, yeah, it was just a really good experience. They do more, but I definitely recommend checking out CRPA.
Yeah, I mean they've got several cases pending here in California. We couldn't do what we do as firearms owners and citizens probably without them. There's a constant battles being fought, and it just seems to be never ending. As soon as it looks like we're gaining a little traction, the Attorney General and Governor's office will just file a new lawsuit and kind of put it seemingly kind of hit the restart button on a lot of things. That's interesting what you just shared right there about the emotions tied to this, tied to the Second Amendment, tied to gun ownership, but more specifically, the grown men crying. The emotion piece, I think, comes up a lot, and I think it gets, unfortunately creeps in when we need to, like, emotion is good, don't get me wrong, but when we start to have these heated debates, they tend to get emotional very, very quickly. And when that happens, the conversation can get shut down or just, I think the energy just gets misdirected and things go wildly wrong. And I see that happening a lot in California because I feel like people are either all the way on one side of this thing or they're all the way on the other. And there is a big faction of people that are in the middle, right? And they don't necessarily want to associate with all the people on this one side, and they're not really feeling the vibe here on this other side either, but they're kind of caught in the middle. Can you talk about your experience with that?
Sure, absolutely. I think a great example with this would be 2020. So all the people in the middle who maybe didn't really follow gun laws, everyone and their moms went out to go buy a gun, and they learned the hard way. Wait a minute, I have to wait 10 days, and I was working for LAX, the gun range in LAX, the range there, and so many
Okay.
people were asking like, "Can I borrow a gun within the 10-day time frame?" We're like, "No, that's not how it works. These are the laws that you probably voted for. Now you have to live with them." And like, wait a minute, so I have to wait 30 days to buy another gun? And then just the magazine capacity law. Like, I just think people in the middle, their eyes were really open to what's happening in California.
Yeah. So for me, that could go both ways. Is that a good thing or bad thing? I don't know if good or bad is the way to really put it. But when you find yourself in that position, it can be very, very overwhelming to try and figure out and understand what the heck is all of this. Like, what's going on here? What's been going on, and what's currently going on? And you were working in a couple of several different capacities, and I want to talk about the firearm instruction here in a little bit, but like, how do you communicate with people, or where did you find like the common ground with them and being able to help them through that process of understanding? And I'm asking that question because I think more than ever, like we had in 2020, I think people are starting, that middle group of people, and even some on maybe either side of on the side of, like, I never really considered having a firearm before, and I haven't really been that fond of the idea at all. But I'm recognizing there's a problem. We have a problem. We have an issue out
Right.
there, and as people say, nobody's coming. I need to be able to protect myself. So they're thinking about moving in to maybe exploring the space a little bit, and it's mind blowing, right?
Yeah,
There's too many things to know. So can you talk about those conversations?
sure. Yeah, I think definitely when it came to like a level of uncertainty, like, okay, now it's time for me to purchase a gun. So for me, I was working at a few ranges in Los Angeles and Orange County, and I tried to make it. I tried to let people know that I wanted them to walk away feeling more comfortable and more confident with a firearm, with a handgun. I thought it was great how at the ranges they could test out miniguns and see like what fit best in their hands. Prior to that, we would go through, the safety aspects, and just in a little classroom. Sometimes I would go to people's homes. So it was like in the privacy of their own homes, and go through just all of the, again, the safety aspects, like how to load, how to unload, how to grip, proper sight alignment. And then we would go to the range from there. Um, I think we mentioned before how, some people on the phone prior to if I was coming to their house, they were like, there's nothing on your car, right? Like your car doesn't say firearms instructor because they didn't want people knowing that they were learning how to use a firearm. And I did one time, I had one mom come to me and she said, I want to make it very clear, I do not like guns. I don't even want to be here. But it was like the quintessential NRA stereotype where like they were cleaning out the grandfather's attic and they found a gun and her son was there and she was like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to touch it, how to pick it up, what was going to happen. What if my son had found it first? So I thought that was kind of interesting that she started it that way. And another thing I'll say, when I was working for the California Rifle Pistol Association, we would get phone calls mostly from young girls, I would say like late high school, maybe early college, and they would call and they'd say, how can you support semi-automatic weapons? And I would always be so nice to them. I don't think they liked it very much. I'd be so nice and say, oh, I'll be happy to explain it. But first, can you tell me what the word semi-automatic means? And 0 out of 10 times they could actually, and they say, well, no. And I'd say, well, I'll be happy to explain it, but can we just acknowledge the fact that like you want to ban something, you don't even know what it is you want to ban. So I think it's just like coming from a friendly perspective and not being too harsh about it and just having open conversations, I think helps like ease people into the whole defending the Second Amendment.
I mean, like I started at the top of the show, I mean, you've got a different perspective for a couple different ways. One, you have a ton of experience at a lot of different levels. I mean, I talk to, again, we've already established, I talk to mostly dudes, right, on the show. And they're often firearms instructors, LEO, ex-military. They have lots of experience in like an institution that deals in and around, the use of firearms or whatever. And then they maybe move into coaching and they move into the things that they're doing now, whatever that happens to be. And again, maybe it's still law enforcement or whatever. But their experiences are generally, and I want to be like clear about this when I say this, is not to be disparaging to anybody I've had on the show, will have on the show, but they're very kind of one-sided. They've come at it from a very, very specific avenue, and that being, like I said, like if you've done law enforcement or you are in law enforcement, there's a culture there. There is very specific instructions, set of rules, set of guidelines, set of policies, set of procedures in terms of how you train, when you can train, what you can carry, what you can't carry, what you do, what you don't do. And oftentimes, again, with that comes, well, the laws state this, so this is what this is. So if I'm explaining it to somebody, I guess where I'm getting at is it can be very one-sided, very narrow in scope. Well, when I talk to you and when we connect, I'm like, you've got a lot of different perspective from a lot of different levels, including the male and female perspective, because this thing is dominated by males, period, end of story. But the female perspective with regard to what you said there about mom and son finding that firearm in grandpa's attic or whatever it is, I find that interesting because I don't think I've ever talked to a male that's gone into his deceased grandfather's attic and gone, well, I found this thing and I don't know how to use it and I need to go out and learn. Like I need to take personal responsibility here to going out and learn. I don't think it would go like that at all. I think it would be very different. So I think it and I could be very wrong. I could be very wrong, but I don't think that's the case. I don't think I am that wrong. And I don't think a lot of people would probably disagree with me. So I think that's an interesting thing to talk about with regard to how the female perspective and how females get into this space, their perception of it, how they arrive in it, the challenges that they find within it, and not to make females different than males in terms of what their capabilities can be behind a firearm or with a firearm. It's not what I'm saying. But I think there are different entry points, and maybe you could talk about yours and some of those experiences that you've seen with folks.
Definitely.
And how you get them there.
So unfortunately, I would have many women come to me and say the same thing, which was something along the lines of, can you help me get a concealed carry permit? And these were women in Los Angeles. because they had just been accosted by a crazy homeless person walking down the sidewalk with their 4-year-old on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I would have to look at them and say, well, you can apply, but there's a really good chance you're either not going to get it, or if you are approved, I think when I left Los Angeles, the approval rate was 0.002% success rate, something crazy like that. And now they've made it so expensive. It's going to be like 2 years if you do get approved. So I would have to look at these moms in the face and say, like, no, you can apply. I'll help you, but just know what you're getting into. But I think they all kind of thought it was going to be a much easier process. But at least I got them more comfortable using a firearm, like in there, if anything were to happen inside their home.
So talk about that actually, just with regard to your experience and the entering into like the firearms instruction space. Because, and I've had several guests on the show and we've talked about this before. We just dropped one on Monday. We were talking about the experience that just people in general get when they walk into a firearms shop or looking to buy their first firearm. And you nailed a couple of the things right now. Like, what? I got to wait 10 days? Like, you can't take this thing home today? Or what is all this paperwork? And what if I want to buy, I just bought my pistol. Now, what if I want to buy a rifle? You got to wait a month and then you have to go through this whole process all over, that kind of thing. But the instruction space is even something even different. And what's very popular, and I liken it to the fitness space because that's the one I come from and where I make a living in. And that is the group instruction space is a very low barrier of entry lower barrier of entry, let's just say, for the consumer or the user, right? It typically costs a little less. I can jump in. It's kind of like, it's nearly a one size fits all. Instructors will tell you it shouldn't be that way. And I try to handle my classes different by vetting my students, that kind of thing. But the bottom line is, in general, it's sort of a one size fits all. They're picking a class based on a class description, maybe a recommendation, may or may not be appropriate for them. Again, just like fitness. And then when they show up, there's a learning curve. And then there's also like this concept of individuality. Like, this person down here has way more ability and familiarity than me. And that person down there has clearly way less. And the instructor has to divide their time and so forth, so on and so forth. So I guess my question in all this is where do you see ladies tending to drop into the space, and how are they sort of, I don't know, shopping or poking around to figure out what the right fit might be for them?
Some of them have been referred to by their other girlfriends. So maybe the girlfriend has something and they recommend it, but then once they come to the range, it's like, well, let's try some other things because maybe it works for your girlfriend, but it's not going to fit really good in your hand. So I think I did mention a few shops in Southern California. There's like Bolsa Gunsmithing, Rifle Supply. Those are amazing shops where they're not just trying to sell you guns. They'll actually tell you, like, go to the range, go try a bunch of guns out, and then come back and we'll sell you one. So I think that's great. But yeah, I think I will say when everyone was buying guns, I would have a lot of women come in and they would say, isn't this so cute? It'd be a tiny gun with like a big caliber. Yeah. And I'd have to say, yeah, it's cute, but it's going to have a lot of kick. It's smaller. You're really going to have to practice for that accuracy, because I think they just think, oh, small gun, it's not going to have a big kick. And I have to explain, like, actually, like, the bigger the gun, the more recoil it's going to absorb, kind of. So like you said, it's a lot to learn if you just come into this not knowing too much about firearms. I've had women come in and once we get into the range, they're actually like crying and shaking. But then we end, and by the end, they're like, that was so fun. You know, when can we schedule another class? So, yeah.
I've been on the range several times with new shooters, you know, young, old, female, male, you know, come out there at all different levels, and to watch the, you know, sort of the discovery process happen, you know, the learning process happen, and then the getting more comfortable, and also the empowerment that happens along the way. I think you got your us guys tend to generally handle our emotions maybe a little bit differently. I think that's kind of science at some level, at a lot of levels now. And, you know, it'll be, it's sometimes it can be like a standoffish, like a quiet, you know, sort of nervousness that's going on. Sometimes it can be something else, but at the end, it always looks the same. across the board, like, oh my God, that was so much fun. I learned so much. I feel so much better about this now. I feel empowered to ask questions, which I think is the bigger thing. They can start asking questions they didn't even know they had. And so that they can
Mhm.
move through their journey in a way that makes the most sense for them. But that entry point is such a challenge, I think, for folks. And you mentioned one of the most important things out there, I think, is, it makes good logical sense that if I'm looking to buy a firearm, I got to go to the gun shop and kind of maybe ask some questions, look around. I really don't know. Like, that gun looks cool. Maybe it's the right one for me. Maybe it's not. That's cute. That one's pink. Like that seems like me. It'll fit in my purse or, whatever. Again, those are all things that I think, a lot of people, kind of go through when they walk in. That gun store experience on the first time is uber important. But not everybody gets that. So it can be very, very poor experience. And I don't want to beat that
Right.
up too much, but it's people like you that are providing content and providing, let's just say, information and a message that is a little bit different, and it helps people through the path. Maybe talk about how you help people do that, because you talked a little bit about your backgrounds, kind of your insight on some things, but
Mhm.
how are you helping people do that right now? Because, and we'll start with number one, you're not in California anymore. You've moved out of California. Can we
Now
talk about that?
we joined the what is it, like 2,000 people a day are leaving, but yeah, 2 years ago we left.
It's over eight
We
hundred
went from
thousand
one
now. Yeah.
city. Oh my gosh, yeah, I can't say I'm surprised, but
Mhm.
it's unfortunate.
Nope.
Yeah, we moved from one surf city to another surf city. We were in Huntington Beach, California. Now we're in Surf City, North Carolina. And I
Hmm.
love that I started a ladies' night, both in California and now out here in North Carolina. And it's once a month. And I would always tell clients, like, at least once a month, take out your firearm. If you're at home, just use dummy rounds and just get reacquainted. And if you can, come to a ladies' night where we can actually shoot, and it's great practice. And there we can practice like drawing from the holster, or I'll even bring, pretty much all my concealed carry classes, I'll bring Alexo Athletica clothing so they can see. They
Hmm.
have leggings, they have jogging apparel, they have like really cute skirts that all have built-in holsters. And then, I'll walk around with it and say, see, this is how easy it is. And I'll tell them, like, if you want to start with the firearm not chamber, just walking around the grocery store until you feel more comfortable walking with one in the
Hmm.
chamber. So just giving them kind of tips, things like that. And I think just being with a whole bunch of women is also a good thing when we do the ladies' night. And then it doesn't hurt that there's a little tavern right next door. So we go shoot and then we finish the night with a few drinks.
Perfect.
Why not? Yeah.
That's perfect. I think that's such a smart approach. I mean, so you're bringing the community aspect to it. There's a little bit of culture to it. I mean, you're talking about fashion, and more specifically, just about functional fashion. Like the gear end of this space is just massive, and it really is. I just had a good friend of mine who, he's a avid shooter, but he has not been carrying for his whole life, and he's just beginning to do that. And he had a lot of questions for me, and as he's asking me the questions, I haven't had that conversation with anybody in a long time. And I want to be clear about this. Dude knows his firearms. Like, he knows his way around the firearms, but there's this whole other aspect of, like, now that I have this, if I'm going to be carrying it outside of, my home and home defense, and outside of the range and the things that he typically does, like, how do I do this? There's a lot of things to know there. Like, he was like, dude, where do I even start with this
Mm-hmm.
holster thing? And he sent me some pictures of some stuff, of what stuff he was looking at. I was like, yeah. Um, let's talk about this. Going back to your, like, your informing people. Let's talk about this a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. And I don't know that a lot of people are doing that. I think when instructors or folks go out to the range, they kind of just look around, they see what everybody else is carrying, or they take all
Mm-hmm.
of their cues from that instructor that happens to be there. So they just tell me what to do. I just want the same setup you have, or whatever. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that could work out really, really well, and sometimes it doesn't. But you're there's a difference between teaching somebody and coaching somebody, in my mind. Like, more,
Mm-hmm.
more specifically, like the instructor versus the coach. And the instructor is going to say, "Here's the curriculum. This is what we're doing. Do it this way. Tick this box. It's all good stuff, right? And at the end, they've learned a new skill, they've shown some proficiency and some efficiency in something. And then I think the coach is more of the person that, they can do all of that, but they also do that with a very acute understanding of who the client or the person is that they're talking to, and they're teaching them and they're instructing them in a way that's more coaching, that allows them to make the decisions for themselves and come to those conclusions for themselves. So putting them in these environments where they're around other people to have these conversations, outside of the interwebs or social media or whatever else, um, gives them that platform to, okay, we're learning something, this is kind of cool. I'm not going to absorb it all right now, but I'm going to walk away, and now I have 5 other people I could reach out to and go, did you try this? Because I tried this and I don't like this at all. What was your take on this, or whatever? I think women are way more likely to do that than men are, in terms of like that reaching out. I don't know if it's an ego block or whatever. The men are going to go to whoever their favorite influencer is on the internet, and they're going to go, well, so and so said I should have this. This is his product, so that's what I'm buying. And they get talked into something or sold something that may not fit their needs the best. I think there's what I've noticed, and this goes to, again, I'm going to parallel this with fitness. Women tend to be a little bit more analytical at the end of the day and a little less emotional, and they don't pretend to know everything, when they're going into it. And dudes might be a little bit pissed at me for saying this right now, but the point of this is providing these environments for folks gives them this opportunity to experience a lot of different things without overwhelming them with any one thing, and expecting themselves to be able to make a decision, and then that's it, I've made the decision, I'm moving on. um, so I guess my question in this is to you is, what are some of the other things that you're doing that help people kind of, I don't know, be along for the experience without feeling like they have to jump in at any one place or one time? Because I've seen you do quite a few different things out there.
I think it's all based on what they're comfortable with. So if they've never shot a gun, maybe they want to have a private lesson. Sometimes, I've taught a lot of couples. There was one class, I think I had 16 people, so it was like 8 couples. That was a concealed carry class. And if I know someone's, very timid, I might have the more comfortable shooters shoot first if we're like qualifying in the concealed carry class. And then if someone's a little bit more, like you could tell if they're nervous, I'll give everyone their certificates and then really work with the people who are pretty nervous with the shooting portion. And I think it's just the ladies' night, just having the options there too. Like, I'll be pretty honest. I'll say, I don't really like this chest holster. I don't really like this ankle holster, but you guys try it out. And then some women love it. And then I'll also be honest and I'll say, I tried concealed carrying with my purse one time. I wasn't comfortable with that. I felt like I had to have my purse on me at all times. I couldn't set it down. And other people, they don't have a problem with concealed carrying in their purse. So I'm never telling people like, this is the way you have to do it. It's just whatever is more comfortable for you.
I think that's huge. I think people, they think they want to be told something, and they're looking oftentimes for like a confirmation bias of, well, this is what somebody else told me, so I'm going to ask the person that I think is going to give me the same answer back that confirms my purchase, my investment here, or the brand that I've now married myself to and talked to all my buddies about, and all of these things. I think that's a dangerous prospect. I don't think that's what we need or want to be doing for folks. I get we all have something to sell at the end of the day, right? And that's what we're trying to make a living. But I don't think you need to do it by making absolute statements about this is the way, and this is the only way. And I think it's a great way to do it. Is just like, I'm reviewing gear in front of you. And this is an option. You can try it, but it's not my favorite option. And here's why. I think being honest is important. So here's something else, like from an honesty perspective. And I mean it. Like, I think there needs to be more honesty in this space. And when I say honesty, I guess I just mean more transparency, and more just telling it how it is in a productive kind of way. And that being, what is the perception that you think that your female clients have of the firearms industry at large, and specifically like what happens from like an influencer or from a I guess like a social media perspective. I don't want to make it all about that, but what do you think
I
their
think
perception is, their hang-ups, any of that?
I think now women are realizing how necessary firearms are and might be pretty necessary to start concealed carrying. A lot of influencers, I like that they talk about real life scenarios. What I like to bring up is there was a jogger, Eliza Fletcher, that last year in Memphis. I tell women, like, I would never tell you you cannot run at 4 in the morning alone. I would say I don't advise it. If you have to do that, just please do so armed, because it did not
Right.
work out well for Miss Eliza Fletcher. So that's when I really started pushing like the athletic wear that also has the holster in it. But maybe I do teach a lot of Marine wives, because the wives don't want to be instructed by their Marine husbands. Maybe they think the
Mm.
firearms industry is, you know, pretty macho and they get a little bit intimidated. But then if they see someone on Instagram with pink and a gun necklace, it's like, oh, wait, she's doing that? Maybe I could try that. And it's not going to be, this like militant style type of direction I'll be giving them.
I think that's super good insight. I think that's how I feel about it. Honestly, that's why I started the show. I mean, I got into this part of the show. I got into this space much deeper, and I started looking around and listening, and I was like, there's some weird stuff going on out there. Like, there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of macho, which I'm way past at this point in my life, right? Like, but I understand, the confidence thing, and I understand the ego thing, and there's a delicate balance there, and there's a time to play it from, towards one side or the other. But one of the things that really struck me was there was so much off-putting sort of, I guess, just crap talking that was going back and forth across the airwaves. I'm like, how many people are we keeping out of this space because these people have the voices that are louder than everybody else? And again, that's why I find you so interesting, is that, like the things that you're doing, you're impacting a lot of people. And that message isn't necessarily being blasted across the airwaves like, I don't know, whoever who happens to have X amount of followers or this amount of subscribers on their YouTube channel or whatever else, which is where people are going to get their information. And I just wonder how you handle that, kind of what keeps you in it, and how you do it differently, and kind of what your thoughts are on how to get your message across differently, but at the same time still stay very effective and relevant.
I would say I try to post things that I would want to know, that I think are important. I post a lot about laws. For a while, it was mostly all California laws. Like, here's what you need to keep your eyes on now. And living in North Carolina, I'm able to say, hey, North Carolinians, we just eradicated this 104-year-old law where you had to go get a pistol purchase permit. Now you don't have to do that, which is great. And I think I talk about, things that make me mad. Like, we had the boxer, Devin Haney, that just got arrested. And it just makes you think, like, he got arrested in one state for doing something that's completely legal in so many other states. So sometimes I get a little fired up about that. And then just, if I see a story about a woman getting abducted, I think it's really important to point out to women, like, these are real scenarios. This woman was a teacher. She had a family. This was a real person, and maybe it could have been avoided. So if I could play any role in having people armed when they go for a run or when they're walking, from a gas station late at night, just kind of having that situational awareness, that's really pretty much what I'm trying to push on Instagram.
So I think that, I've heard you have it, or like take some takes, or have some takes on a few things. I mean, you mentioned like the runner, who, you mentioned the runner in Memphis, some of the stuff that may be happening in California. And then I'll be honest, like when I've seen you sometimes comment on things, you're not always taking, I would say, like the most popular line on it. And even maybe even people or you have friends or whatever that you disagree with, and you're not afraid to talk about it. you always back it up with some rationale, which I really appreciate. It's not, this is why this person's wrong and this is why I'm right, but maybe here's another way to look at it, and you maybe come at it from a different perspective. So one of those things that I remember that struck me, it just kind of popped into my head here, is there were some, I think there were maybe shop owners in SoCal, and they were talking about having campus security officers that were armed, and
Mm-hmm.
that they should be armed, but we should restrict any administration or teaching staff from being able to carry, and so they shouldn't be able to have guns on campus, but these officers or campus resource officers should. You took a very interest. Do you remember that? Do you remember that sort of that take that you had? Can you talk about that?
Well, anytime it comes to gun-free zones, which is typically campuses, it just blows my mind that people think gun-free zones actually work. Like, how do you not see that these are all just sitting ducks? Like, I think it's somewhere close to 90% of all mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. And I was on a little Jubilee show, and one thing I said was, if you are about to shoot up a place and there's one sign that says gun-free zone and then another sign that says the staff is heavily armed, we will do everything we need to do to protect life. Like, which place is the person going to go? It's a no-brainer. So I do like to talk about those issues. And another thing I'm pretty passionate about is anytime a politician who is, surrounded by armed security, who paid for with our tax dollars, it just grinds my gears anytime they're talking about disarming Americans. Because, especially Gavin Newsom and Kathy Hochul in New York, when they're talking about what's the new thing after Bruin was like sensitive areas. And I definitely remember video where I was thinking, like, you think their armed security is going to put their guns away in these quote unquote sensitive areas? No, give me a break.
It is really obnoxious. I think it was a week ago, the district court shut down the New York couple that you just mentioned there on the good moral character stipulation, or requirement, in order to be issued a permit to buy a firearm, which that is a state where you have to have a permit and even buy a firearm. But that the government, those folks, were going to go ahead and evaluate anybody that applied for one of these permits to determine whether or not the applicant was of good moral character, and that was going to be, again, like some type of a requirement that they would decide in order for somebody to exercise their Second Amendment right. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
That's like one of the most offensive things I could possibly imagine.
And all you have to do is look at a few cases, like Carol Bowen, I think her name was, in New Jersey. She was waiting and waiting and waiting to see if her pistol purchase permit had been approved. And I think it was over 30 days. She had an estranged ex-boyfriend. And while she was waiting, she was murdered. She was stabbed to death in her own driveway, waiting for her own government to approve that, yes, you can own a handgun. It's so frustrating to hear those stories.
It's stories like that and cases like that make my blood boil. It brings all the things back to kind of New York, New Jersey, California. Those are some of the more strict, I think, states. Obviously, there are other states out there that are facing their own things more than ever. And you just mentioned some things maybe people didn't understand about North Carolina, specifically to having a permit to have to buy or to be able to buy a pistol. I didn't know that. That kind of blew my mind.
Now
I had no idea with so much. Yeah, it's gone now, right? Yeah, but there's so many military bases out there, and there's so many shooting instructors that I know that are from that area. Nobody's ever said that. Like, these are major people, like I'd say in the industry and the business, that have been on major publications. Some even have run for public office at the highest level, Congress, right? At the highest level. They live there, right? They're operating there. They have businesses there, and they have not said two words about that type of a thing, which I think is huge for people to understand, and spreading the word that, look, the fight is being fought, and it is being won at a lot of levels. And here's how you can leverage this as a citizen. Because to me, it's like, first off, if you really are fighting for this, if you really are that, that patriot, right? That
Mm-hmm.
makes a living, based on the rights that are protected for us with regard to the Second Amendment. I feel like you should be spreading the message about what's going on out there with regard to legislation and educating people at some level. I'm not saying you have to do it all the time, but never doing it. And when I say never, I
Right.
mean never. Like, I never heard a word about any of this. So I find that's very interesting. And but you've taken it so many steps further. Can we talk about the 50 guns in 50 states?
Yes, I would love to talk about 50 states in my sights.
Let's talk
That's
about it. Uh,
the name of my book. I decided to shoot a gun in all 50 states. I did it in about 3 years, and it was just a really cool experience.
how did you do it? Like, how did you tackle this?
Well, the funny thing is, like we said, so many people are moving out of California. So I felt like half of my trips were just visiting Californians who moved out. And, I had friends that moved to Florida,
Okay.
Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee. So kind of all over. And sometimes I would visit and then hit a few states and then, go up, fly out
Mm-hmm.
from there. So it all worked out, but it was really fun just planning everything. Like, okay, here's where I'm going. What are the ranges around that I can hit? What kind of gun am I going to bring? So just the whole thing, what kind of friends, what family members are going to come with me on these adventures. And it really was an adventure. A lot of people were up for it. Like, I'll go shoot a gun with you. Some people I knew really well, and other people like became better friends because of it. But but the book is pretty much just like the state and then the trip, and then the next page is all about the gun laws. So every time I went to a new state, I would ask people
Okay.
like, "What are some gun laws you have here?" And especially coming from California, it was really interesting. Like some of them, New Hampshire pretty much had zero. What? That's crazy. And then there were other states where I was like, "Whoa, are you trying to out California with these gun laws?" So
Right.
very interesting.
You ever get caught in any hairy situations, like where that gun law that you had no idea about may have gotten the better of you in that particular state? Maybe you can't talk about it, or maybe you can. I don't know.
All right. I wanted to
I don't
carry
want to
my
get you in
gun
trouble.
everywhere with me in Philadelphia, where like technically I could because if we
Mm,
had reciprocity, but then I couldn't. Like they had the metal detectors at the Liberty Bell, so my friends were like, "Oh, we got to walk all the way back to the hotel," and they were happy that I had a gun on me. But then, sometimes just you can't take it places, so walk all the way
mhm.
back to the hotel, like 30-degree weather, and then go back to the Liberty Bell and all the cool sites in Philadelphia, but not too many hairy situations. There was one time I was flying to Indiana, and when I was flying out of North Carolina, a guy next to me, I guess they lost his luggage. And I remember thinking, like, I just don't think they're going to lose my luggage because the airlines don't want to be culpable of like losing a firearm. And I actually like made a little video. Sure enough, get to Indiana, no bag, no gun. They lost my bag. I was like, I totally just jinxed myself. But I learned a lot about flying with your firearm. So if they do lose it, say you go home, the airline won't drive your luggage to you if there is a firearm in it. So you have to go all the way back. Or if your flights change, like once I think I flew out of Myrtle Beach and they're like, "Oh, we can send you to Wilmington." And then I thought to myself, "Oh, then I'm going to have to drive all the way back to Myrtle just to pick up my bag." So a lot of things I learned.
I have my own experience with flying with firearms, and I went through the same thing. They lost they lost a rifle, and I went about 72 hours and no idea where it was. And you get lost in the call center. You end up not being able to talk to anybody. And, and, uh, interestingly, so the address it was attached to was the work address. And so just in the afternoon, like 3 days later, all this delivery guy walks in the door. I get a notice, like an email about 30 minutes before it arrived that, my bag's being delivered. So, but he walks in the door,
Oh,
all
so
the
they did
buckles
deliver.
on it.
What
They
year
did.
was
So they
that?
delivered it here. It just happened.
You definitely want to
Maybe.
check them with your airline. So it must be different airlines. Definitely American, I believe it was, that would not deliver.
So I think these are interesting
But that
things
would
to
be
know for
terrible.
people. It was. I mean, and by the way, so when it got here, it's this large Pelican 1650s, big, huge, or 1750, big, long, like they're the longest version of the rifle case, shows up, and I have my locks on it, and they had clearly been messed with, but all the buckles. So there's 4 big buckles, fasteners on that thing. They were all wide open, like the delivery guy. Like, in my mind, I was like, if I'm the delivery guy, I'm going, okay, it's clearly a firearm. You can't get to it. Thank God they couldn't get into it. But
Yeah.
if I'm the last guy to touch this and I'm delivering it back to the owner, maybe I want to close the latches to make it not look like maybe I was the guy that did that, but not the case. So, yeah, I think, there's a lot for people to learn with regard to traveling with firearms. I think that's a huge question. I know it's a question I get a lot from out of state folks, that particularly instructors that have never come to California to teach, and I think that holds them back from teaching because they're worried about
Yeah.
California law, what could happen once they arrive here, and the process is what happens if they get pulled over. What about suppressors? What about non-California legal firearms? That kind of stuff. I mean, those are all really good questions, and I think I gave a buddy of mine down, and I just met with him a week ago. He's from Texas. I think I gave him a massive headache just walking through like all the different things. He's from Texas, fairly free state, right? When it comes to this stuff, but I think he lost his mind. So going back to the book, so you go all 50 states. You even got up to Alaska.
I did. That was my final frontier. Alaska was my final frontier. But it was me and 6 girlfriends. We had a blast. We shot in Anchorage. And it was funny because they had just like regular targets, which I'm used to. And then a girlfriend was like, do you have any fun targets? And the guy's like, do. And he turns around, pulls out this giant, like huge grizzly bear target. So that was the one I actually kept. Usually I don't care about targets. But I was like, I'm going to keep this target.
Talk to me about how you're
Surprisingly,
received in these different spots. Like, obviously, you said you were with your friends, but like when you go and you're showing up to these new places, and I mean the story's kind of got to get out a little bit. Talk about like those conversations, how you're received, and I mean we have to add the little addition here, which is you're from California, right? Originally, so that has to come up in here, and there's got to be a lot of questions around that.
Yeah, people, when I tell them like, oh yeah, I'm shooting in all 50 states, some people could care less, and that's fine. But other people are really intrigued. There was probably Mississippi was just super pumped. They like gave me one of their shirts from the ranges, and Rhode Island, they were really excited too. And when I mentioned I was from California and asking about their gun laws, that same day that I shot in Rhode Island was the same day that the governor signed to cap their magazines at, I believe, 10 rounds. And I was like, I feel you.
In Rhode Island.
You guys got to be on in Rhode Island. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And there was quite a few states in New England where it was a really good thing I brought not just my own firearm, but my own ammunition, because I think it was Connecticut was there. I think Rhode Island as well, where if you didn't have your firearms identification card, you couldn't, or there was another, like a blue card that showed you took the test and everything, then like you couldn't rent and you couldn't buy ammunition. So it was a really good thing. I brought all that on my own. Yeah. New Jersey, I had to make friends really fast because they wouldn't let us even open a lane. It was me and 2 of my girlfriends who were actually military wives. And they were pretty upset that they weren't allowed to shoot there because it was something with the fact that they were military spouses. So then this couple just said, oh, jump in our lane. And so I got to check off New Jersey. I took a picture with them. So now they're in my book. They found me on social media. So that was kind of fun. Oh, thank you so much. Like, would not have been able to check off New Jersey without them.
Time out. So the range had an issue with military spouses shooting at the range.
Well, because they didn't have their firearms identification. Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just stuff people just don't understand. I mean, they I mean, people, again, I live in California. It's a little weird here. I get it. People, but what, and people focus on some of the things that are happening here and what's bled over into Oregon, what's now bleeding over into, it's bled over into Washington. We're going to see some wild stuff that's kind of bled over into Idaho. We've got we've got a guy from the DOJ from down here that was part of the I forget which case it was. I believe this is one that Firearms Policy Coalition was fighting. That Benitez here in the Ninth District basically said, "Dude, you're not even a credible attorney. Like you're trying to fight these battles about semi-automatic rifles, and you've never even handled one in your life. You've used your background in the firearms industry or your resume as some type of qualification." And you never even, that company you work for doesn't even produce these things. And you never even dealt with any of this stuff. So kind of took it to the next level. But that guy's running for governor in Montana. So I think the thing that I always try to make people aware of is like, hey, it's weird in other spots and you're going to run into all this stuff. But just because it's not happening in your state now doesn't mean it isn't going to wind up. This shit's like cancer. And I think there's a lot of fear, like when people from California go into other states, that a lot of this stuff is going to maybe follow them. Where I think if I asked you why you moved out of California, it was probably get away from a bit of this stuff. And same with your friends that probably moved elsewhere. But maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
I definitely felt like when we moved to North Carolina, I needed a t-shirt that said, "We're the good Californians, I swear," moving here. And I do think once people heard like, well, what did you do in California? Oh, I worked for the California Rifle Pistol Association, like fighting for California gun rights, and I teach concealed carry classes. They were kind of like, okay, maybe she is a good one. But it is just so eye-opening when you leave a very like authoritarian state and you come out to somewhere like North Carolina, where the second I moved here, I like literally skipped out of a gun shop with a 34 round magazine. Like I just put cash, $24 on the cashier, and then I just like skipped out. And I was looking around like, is someone going to tackle me for daring to buy a high capacity magazine? And I saved up my money. I bought 2 guns at one time. I just did all the things, and it just felt really good. And I think once you come from that, you really want to do everything you can to make sure it doesn't follow you to your new home.
So talk about that, because you recently had an experience and put a lot of effort into helping your own community, because you've been trying to get more involved. I mean, we talked about the firearms classes that you've been teaching, the continued work that you do to educate people. Talk about, I mean, as recent as yesterday, you were trying to continue to bring things to the table that to help keep, let's just say, keep America free. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. It kind of all started when I started immediately started going to the town hall meetings. And I did notice there was a no concealed carry paper. And I was like, technically we can conceal carry in this building. I talked to the police chief. He's like, I could take it down whenever I want. And it turns out it was like the town council that requested it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to run for town council. So I did for 8 months. I put in a lot of work, and I did try to remind everyone, 2020 wasn't that long ago. Look how important local government can be. In California, we had paddle boarders get arrested, and we had, mayors filling in skate parks with sand and just like crazy things happening. Don't even get me started on masks. Out here in North Carolina, I feel like I played a pretty big role in getting the masks off our kids' faces. And so it just made me want to get involved. And it was a really, really good experience. Everyone I ran against had either lived here for over 20 years or had held the spot for city council for like over 20 years. So I knew I was definitely an underdog. And I actually finished pretty good for only living here for like 2 years and being from California. So we'll see what the future holds.
I mean, I think that's awesome. But I think you just painted a very real picture of the realities that we're faced with within our our municipal or local municipal governments as well as beyond. And that is, it's usually an old cadre of folks. When I say old, I don't necessarily mean by age, but it sure seems to look that way.
Right.
And people get comfortable, and there's agendas there and all the things. I don't have to get into that. I mean, I'm sure I don't want to insult the listeners either by going down that list of things, but trying to kind of win friends and influence people. I can't imagine how much work that takes when you drive into the state with a California license plate that I'm sure you tried to change pretty quickly, so that that stigma is not
Immediately.
following you. Yeah. I have a I have a travel van. I travel pretty frequently, and sometimes when I roll into other states, yeah, I get some weird. So I get some weird looks. I get some middle fingers sometimes, and it is. And I get it. I think I get it. I don't like that. I wouldn't do that to somebody else because I know how it feels, but I get it. And I
Yeah.
understand the fear. I mean, I would be afraid. I think I would be afraid of you too at some level, especially if I've been sitting in my spot for 20 years and
Yeah.
here comes this gal who's just like, I got things to say and here's how it should be. And here's my experience with what happens if we don't stay on top of this stuff. And when maybe old people continue to get voted into office and they don't want to make change and they don't want to be, this is an interesting word, this word progressive. Like what's interesting to me is like I see everything that's happening on the by the popular definition of the word now, progressive. I think that's the most unprogressive thing you could ever do. I think like we're trying to progress economics, we're trying to progress what our schools are teaching, right? Instead of
Hmm.
digressing or regressing and all that kind of stuff. I look at that as being progressive. So you're coming in my mind, is like with a progressive mindset going, hey, I'm not saying we got to change everything, but we should probably be taking a look at kind of some of these things. And maybe one of those things is the first thing is like, why is this sign hanging at the front of City Hall?
Why is
Like
this
what?
fine?
Or,
I did
what,
actually, yeah, before I ran, I gave like you can give public comment for a few minutes, and I did a whole spiel on how concealed carry permit holders, we're like these most law-abiding people in America. I think there was a statistic that John Lott Jr., I'm sure you follow his writings, but he was talking about how a recent study showed concealed carry holders commit 1/7 the crime than cops in America. And if you're a male with
weird.
a concealed carry permit, you're like 13 times less likely to commit a violent crime. If you're a female, you're like 8 times less likely to commit crime if you have a concealed carry permit holder. And I made the point, if someone is evil and wants to do something bad, they're going to walk right past that piece of paper and know exactly like the one cop to take out first. And now we're all sitting ducks. So I was a little disappointed I didn't win, just so I couldn't like peel that piece of paper off. But
I get it. I'm sure there's bigger battles to fight, down the road. And, if you're staying as involved as and you are, I'm sure you're going to make some friends and you're probably going to make some quote unquote enemies along the way. But maybe you can talk about like the 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 positive side of being received. I mean, you said you finished pretty well, all things considered. Sounds like you're taking a
all
pretty
things
different line than probably most people are. Can you talk a little bit just about
yeah.
like the positive stuff? Because again, like people, what we hear is don't California my whatever state, insert the state
Yeah.
name, right? Don't bring that
Yeah.
here. And like I said before, I think I understand that at some level. I think it's a little bit misplaced energy, but I do understand it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that said, like, can you talk about some of like the positive stuff in terms of the headway that you have made? And I mean, you
Sure.
mentioned the masks thing with regard to the kids, but I mean, just like relationships wise and what you've been able to accomplish in the time that you have been there.
Yeah. I will say I met a lot of people who have moved from other states like New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and California. And 99% of the time, they all move for the same reasons. And I think people appreciated that I was very honest. Anytime they asked me a question, I wasn't like, oh, what should I, what do people want to hear? I was like, no. When people
Mm,
said, like, well, what don't you want to see follow you from California? Maybe it sounds insensitive. I don't care. But the insane homeless encampments that were just everywhere. I don't want to see that come to our cute little beach town. Like, I like the fact that there's not needles on the beach. I like the fact that my daughter can use the public bathroom and there's not a person living in the public bathroom. And even just, I would send pictures on Instagram of my city council account, pictures of California gas prices. That was a huge eye opener. I believe it was 2017 when I really looked into the whole gas tax. And I wasn't big on like Facebook, but I read it and I was like, guys, this is a bad bill. We already pay taxes that are supposed to fix our roads, and the politicians can up it every year without a vote. And the fact that like they voted to tax themselves more, I was like, what's going to be next? So that was when I was thinking like, maybe we don't want to stay in California forever. So I talk about just the importance of that, the importance of voting for a good district attorney. So you see what's happening in LA, which makes no sense when they're trying to like fight gun violence. Right now, the district attorney, he's eliminating gun enhancements. So I think if you're a responsible gun owner, you want the bad guys who are like robbing, like committing armed robbery, like you want them to go away. But now they're saying like, well, let's give him a pat. So what? He used a gun. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I definitely know, picking the good people in certain positions. School board, are the school board members going to follow suit? Oh, well, everybody else is masking the kids. Maybe we should. No, it's like, you have to stand on your principles. And I did have people reach out today after the election. They're like, you really did say what you felt and you stood on your principles. And I respect that. So I can lay my head all right at night. It was a good experience for sure.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, and again, that's one of the major reasons I wanted to talk to you, is just that we have folks leaving California that are trying to make a difference in other places and taking their experiences with them. And while people from the outside looking in those new places might be, we don't want any of that here. To your point, like 99% of the people that you've talked to that are moving to the town that you're living in are moving for the reasons that you moved, which is, I got to get away from this stuff and I don't want to be around it anymore. And so whether it's a community service just to be letting people know about it, and or taking it to the next level where you're actually serving on a seat where you are, legitimately influencing this with a vote, or being able to get out in front of more people to spread the message. I think it's important, and I'm all about my Californians that want the freedoms and expect the freedoms that they are entitled to as humans, but also that are guaranteed from a protection perspective in the Constitution. So, again, like I said, I get it if you're living in a different state and you're a little bit nervous about folks, but I think there's a lot more folks than people realize, like you, out there, and they would do the same stuff if they felt like they had the opportunity. So that's another question is as folks are going into these new areas and they may be facing some resistance. Let's talk about Californians moving out, and they're facing some resistance, and they're maybe not being welcomed. What's your advice to them?
I would try to just put their worries aside, like just immediately. Like, we're from California, and if you, for me at least, just letting people know that I teach handgun lessons, that kind of already gives them peace of mind. Not to get like super political, but we didn't come here with like our rainbow flags and things like that. Like, that's, like I said, we're just super friendly with everybody, and we're honest. All I can say is like, we're just be honest with people. And that's a good question, how to like kind of quell the nerves of people. I would just say, be honest, be upfront, maybe do it sooner than later.
Well, I think that's not doing that maybe be the thing that got California to where it is, with people not speaking their mind and not being upfront and not being completely transparent with, or I think that the term maybe is honesty, about the way they're feeling about something and putting it out there, for fear that somebody might disagree with them and that somehow they might be socially ostracized because they think or feel differently. And I think that is a major problem that we have here in California, that people hide behind the status quo because If they don't, their job is threatened, their social status is threatened. We've seen it here where if you push back, your job, you could get doxxed, and your job could be threatened, and you might not have it. And these are legit concerns. I get it. So if you're going to leave here and you're leaving for those kind of reasons, and don't just if you're not standing up, you're not being honest, I would say, then are you helping or hurting? Like just leaving here, okay, you left, but is it making it any better anywhere else? And are you putting yourself and your fellow community in a position to stand up or know who they can count on when this shit comes to town? Because it seems to continually proliferate. Doesn't matter where you live, it's popping up. If you don't think it will, just wait longer is kind of what I tell them. So just be prepared and maybe listen to the folks that have had to deal with it on a daily basis. So let's talk just real quick. Let's kind of, as I'm wrapping this up here, when does the book come out? When's the book finally get released?
Everything is done. So I turned it into a publisher. It should be early December, just like right around the corner. I'm so excited about it. I want to do something fun, like maybe have some gun raffles. If I sell so many books, I raffle off a gun. Make sure it's California compliant if California reader wins.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
I never imagined that I would have a book out. So this is something really cool. Super pumped about it.
I think it's super exciting. I'm excited for anything we can do here to help, promote the book and get it in people's hands and give people a different perspective. And all you got to do is ask. That's consider it done. But on the other thing, like going back to the yeah, you got it, no problem. The going back to the California compliance thing, we're starting to see some stuff happen, and we're starting to actually see some gun manufacturers even kind of push back a little bit and do some different things. SIG just released their new version of California compliant pistol that we haven't been able to get here. It's got some interesting features on it, but those people that know that's a huge step in the right direction. Getting a manufacturer as big as Sig Sauer to do something like that here, when it costs them the kind of money that it costs in order for them to get something like that approved, I don't think people understand like the roster in full and kind of why it remains limited the way it is, and why how much it costs a gun manufacturer to go through the process, and they have to grease pockets. The bottom line at the end of the day is it's a racket. You probably know more about that than I do, but to see that happen was exciting.
I'm sure it will pay off, though, don't you think? Because Californians get so excited when they add a gun to the roster. So I do think whatever the money they put in, I'm sure they'll get a good return on that.
I think I'm less excited for SIG than I am for the small business owner and the gun shops in the state, for them to be able to offer a new, something different, something that people really want, that a lot of people have been trying to figure out a way to work around, and, what can I do? And, there's a lot of people, hoops and rings people try to jump through to make certain things happen. So, and that includes, and it starts and stops with the firearms, shop owner, trying to figure out how to get this. There's a small firearms store down in Southern California when these things got released, and they're not going to see theirs for a while because they're going to go to the bigger shops to start. They're going to go to the Turners and the big sporting good outlets like Bass Pro and stuff like that. It's going to be a challenge, for them to finally get there and or finally get their hands on them to be able to supply the folks that want to support those local stores. They don't want to go to the big corporate business. They want to support their local stores. So I think that's the thing I'm the most excited about. I recognize the challenges they run into initially, but I think that's a big step in the right direction, particularly with all the new restrictions and limitations that they go through with shops anyways.
Yeah. Well, I'll say something, and I'll try to put it the best way possible. That I'm just going to say, living now in North Carolina, when I saw the huge excitement about the new gun going on the roster, my first thought was like, it's just so sad. And I feel bad saying that, but that was really my first instinct, was like, they're so excited. about this. And sometimes I'll see it with gun laws too. If Benita signed something about the Duncan versus Bonton now with the magazines. It's like, oh, maybe we can, Freedom Week. Like looking back now, it's like an outside perspective is just, oh man, that's what they're so excited about, that they have a week to buy standard capacity magazines, or that they get this new gun that they could buy, and then they have to wait another month to buy another one. So it definitely makes you want to fight harder to make sure that that doesn't come where you move to. But sorry if I offended anybody for saying that.
I don't think you did at all. I mean, I say it all the time. I mean, it's those kinds of things that I think draw the community that is here, the shooting community and firearms culture in general, tighter and closer here. And I say it all the time, we're kind of behind enemy lines, we're behind the wall, and so any little win that we can get, we try to savor and cherish.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be folks out there, even in the state, that are going to go big deal, and they're going to have something else to say. Look, it's America. You can say whatever you want. You can feel however you want, man. But I think it's a choice, and you have to choose, the positive as much as you can. And going back to, the Benitez Bonta stuff, there are not too many people here in California that I loathe more than our governor and our attorney general for a lot of reasons. It goes way beyond the Second Amendment for a lot of reasons. And so anytime there's somebody that's standing in the way or making their job at least a little bit more difficult, despite the fact that they end up using our tax dollars to pay themselves and to fight, unconstitutional laws that they've passed, I'm still going to take that as like, hey, we're moving this we're not taking it laying down. And the closer it gets to these types of things get to the Supreme Court, there's going to be a lot of other states out there that I think will be able to thank us when that happens for all the work that CRPA has done, with all the work that FPC has done, with all the work that you did, right, and are currently doing, and all the other folks, and members of the community that continually stand up. They're trying their best to have a voice to fight back, because that's where we want it. We want it in the Supreme Court. We want them to have to make a decision. And I'm going to hold tight to, I still want to believe in our judicial system, as tough as it is for me sometimes to do that. Sometimes I want to believe that they'll do the right thing, and it'll put to bed a lot of this stuff. And guys like Bonta, guys like Newsom are going to have to eat their shorts. And, people like us and the other law-abiding, peaceable citizens in this state and other states can go back to living in America, freedom.
Yeah. I think it is frustrating when we do get the wins, like the assault weapons ban with the Benitas, and then maybe some Californians think, okay, I'm going to go buy whatever I want. But then it's like, whoa, wait, the California DOJ just appealed it. So now I got to go back. So I think what you said about the Supreme Court is spot on. Like the Bruin was such a huge win. I think, just taking out the whole good cause, that was huge. So yeah, just the Supreme Court wins. I really do think a lot of California cases will end up there. Fingers crossed. So we all have to wait and see.
I think they understand that. I think, those legislators here understand that, and they're a bit on their heels at this point. It can't go on for too much longer, I don't think. However, long is relative in the legal and judicial system. I mean, those two guys can crank out lawsuits faster than the judicial system can keep up with it, and that is why we are where we are. But to your point, I agree with you that is when it gets there, when it gets past this, when we get past this nonsense of kicking it back and forth, we'll have some wins, but more specifically, some wind in the sails to get some other stuff to happen and certain things to stop happening. And one of those things that to happen, I think, is to restore faith in our election process, in our judicial process, in our executive branch process. Over time to give people faith in the system that makes our country what it is. Because I think a lot of people are disenfranchised with it, I find myself there quite frequently. So it gets me fired up when I see folks like you that are, that are jumping into it and go, no. I'm fighting this fight. I'm going to jump in because we need folks like you in there, doing that kind of work. So it's good to know that there's folks out there doing that. And again, I'll just put that little plug in that it's good to know this person, started in California.
The more people we can talk to about the importance of the Second Amendment, whether it's just like new clients or even friends or neighbors, just taking them out to shoot for the first time, then we've got this whole army behind us. And then another thing to think about too is like just who you associate with, even when it comes to churches. Because I think we talked a little bit about how the whole Measure 114 in Oregon, that was pushed so hard by a specific Lutheran church. So just having the awareness of like, who am I associating with and what do they stand for? And just really getting the word out, I think is so important.
Yeah, can you go back to that actually? Can we talk about that for a second? Because here's what I know, and that got passed with such haste at the state level that I had actually a gun shop owner on the show literally 30 days after that thing passed, and we went through all the details of kind of where it was at that point, the things that they were dealing with. I've talked to him since. I've actually visited him in the shop to kind of follow up on him, but the question always is like, how did this happen? Like, how do you go from 0 to 100 in the time frame that it did, to where now everybody's caught off guard, thinking again, and most citizens thinking this was a good thing, and everybody from that level down recognized what they did, and they had no ability to control, no ability to administer, no ability to even explain what had just happened. So can you explain that a little bit more specific to the church?
I think a lot of it had to do with money. They were outspent. The anti-Second Amendment, like they were spending, I think it was like $3 million versus like $170,000 for the people trying to get the word out. So moms demand action. Every town, I've personally been to one of their meetings and they're pretty organized. They can spin things. So many people were like misinformed in the little meeting that I went to. But they've got all their postcards ready, and they're just heavily funded. And then again, this like giant Lutheran church hugely supported this like crazy anti-Second Amendment bill. If you look into the church, you'll see there's like Reverend Jesse Jackson, like just big names too. So it's hard to see when you have so many. I think you had like this whole sheriff's department, police association was saying, no, this is bad. Like, we are not going to be able to hire more people or, wait for crime to happen and no one can get to it because we're like teaching these, citizens of Oregon who probably already know everything about handguns, but they have to take this specific class and pass now in order to get this permit. So I think that was just really frustrating to see how much money and just big names were behind it versus, so many Second Amendment supporters. They had to have been really frustrated when that passed. But it does sound like nothing's really happened yet.
Mm-mm.
No, yeah, like I don't think they can figure it out. So they say, oh, we're going to pass this, and then it doesn't make any sense, and it like nothing can actually function. So then, so far, it sounds like there are no classes to get a permit in Oregon right now, and I think I have to go watch your interview with the gun shop owner because it sounds like it's pretty much on pause. So that's a good thing. It's like they bit off more than they can chew.
Nothing has changed since that passed in Oregon, specific to the permit process and having to go through this class to obtain a permit to purchase a firearm. However, in the circuit court judge said, this is a little weird. Like I'm not going to rule on this, but the magazine capacity thing was something that she said she would consider and that she would maybe rule on separately. That being a 10-round magazine capacity, which I don't want to even open that up on this show. That goes to, I mean, we've dealt with that for a very long time and how ridiculous that is.
did you see that there was one sheriff in Oregon that said, no, we are not going to enforce this? And can you imagine if just all the sheriffs everywhere said, no, we're not enforcing these BS laws? Like, good for them, especially like in New Mexico when the governor tried to, pull everybody's concealed carry permits, and there was quite a few sheriffs that were like, no, it's a constitutional right. We are not going to arrest people who are, concealed carrying. So I think it is so important to vote for your local sheriff, where I think it's only something like 8% of Americans actually go out and vote for their local sheriff. But look how much power they have in your community.
Look, I mean, we saw, yes, that I can't remember. I don't know if it's Jackson County is what the county is there in Oregon, but John Humpton, who's the guy I interviewed, owns Black Flag Armory there in Medford, Oregon. And he was saying, like, our sheriff has already come out and said, we are not doing this. Like, we're not going to enforce this. We don't have the time. We don't have the time. We don't have the money. And we certainly don't have the inclination to even worry about any of this. We're not doing it. And outside of that, so what I was saying is nothing's really changed there. The thing is still sitting. What has changed, though, is that a lot of people are like, well, I need to be buying more firearms now. And so and then they've instituted like there's a background check involved with this. And that's sort of slowed things down, in terms of how fast, this background checks happen. But the gun shop owners there are working through it. I guess the point of this whole thing is this goes back to the legislative people that are continually filing lawsuits at a rate that the judicial system cannot come up with or cannot keep up with. The bigger problem with that is that I have with it is it's one thing to maybe pass a law that you think is going to be doing something that's favorable to stopping violence or whatever else. None of that is happening. So that's not changing anything. But more than that is like what you're doing is you are infringing on the Second Amendment and somebody's ability to acquire their firearms. And there are no repercussions to any of this. And the thing just keeps continually being put back in the cycle and battled in the courtroom, for which these politicians, and again, like these attorney generals or whatever else, are using taxpayer dollars at the rates of hundreds of thousands of dollars or more in order to fight an unconstitutional law, to defend an unconstitutional law. That fries the hell out of me. It absolutely fries the hell out of me. Going back to, it's important that you vote. It is important that you vote. Now, going back to being disenfranchised, I know there's a lot of people in California are like, dude, we're not going to change anything here now because Los Angeles County, San Francisco, or the majority of Bay Area, they basically run things are controlled there. But I don't think that's entirely true. And at the very least, you could be still making a fight about it. Because again, as I've said to you, or as we've talked about, you're going to get people on board. And the most important thing is that you're in the fight. You got to be in the fight. Like, don't sit idly by and expect somebody else to do it.
Agreed. I think what I hate the most is my hometown, Long Beach. They put their mayor, who I don't think was a very good mayor. He's in Congress now, and he's working with Elizabeth Warren on this big bill to limit how much ammunition people can buy. And the first thing I put on his social media was, okay, so you're going to introduce this bill. How about, are you going to introduce a bill that will stop the insane homeless people from stabbing women in their kids' playgrounds in Long Beach? That's actually affecting your constituents, but he's completely silent on that. So anytime any other weapon is used, they're not going to talk about it. But as soon as it's a firearm, it's like, okay, what can we do to take away people's rights? Not to mention it's not going to do anything because criminals aren't going to follow this at all. I'm sure you just saw the video. Was that last night that came out in Larchmont, which is a really, really nice area in Los Angeles? A guy was walking to his door and was approached by two people. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, do those criminals have only 10 rounds in their magazines? No, who is it affecting? It's affecting the guy who's got a gun to his head, in front of his own home.
Yeah, he's just trying to walk in his front door with a cup of coffee and, see his family or whatever. And man, that was a hairy situation. He was caught in. There was one way in and one way out of there outside of his front door, which wasn't unlocked yet. Yep, it's making its rounds. Most people will see it. It's a yeah, that was a hairy situation, and a case for why we have why we have a Second Amendment. But more importantly, what you said to me, the more important thing is the guys that rolled up on him and did what they did or tried to perpetrate what they were perpetrating. They're not following laws, and it guaranteed that's not the first time they've done that. Right? They're practiced. They're pros at this, and like I'm not a pro victim, but there's a lot of pro professional criminals out there, and we just things continue to get softer. I mean, you just mentioned like we're taking away the in LA the mayor there taking away the additional enhancements. Like, come on, man! Like, what are you?
Right.
You're literally encouraging people to go commit crime.
Right. Yeah. And what's also interesting is my husband, he was with the LA County Sheriff's Department for 15 years. He watched the video and he was almost worried for the victim because he shot as the people were like fleeing. And he's like, I wouldn't be surprised if a DA tried to get him on charges of like shooting at a fleeing perpetrator. But it's like, that just doesn't make any sense. So it could happen and I wouldn't even be surprised with what's happening. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't either. I don't know if you just saw there was a sorry, without bringing up all these stories, but just to bring light to the ridiculousness of this, there was a female LA County Sheriff's officer gets called to a home. Mom has called because the son, who's a grown adult, is having a tough time. I believe he might be like an emotionally disturbed person. Has a knife. She shows up on scene. They get into a wrestling match. He's able to get the firearm away, the officer's firearm away from her, and then starts shooting at her as she's running away. All charges dropped. Oh, like this lady's like she had her ass beat. She had she was shot at. The reason she was there was because of him. It wasn't like he was just an innocent bystander and by happenstance assault, and he got all charges dropped, acquitted.
And now can you imagine if he went on to commit another crime? Yeah. And then if you're the victim of that, you're like, this guy could have been behind bars, but no. And it happens so often.
I mean, we see that happening regularly here. We see this happening regularly. We just had we had a couple officers shot not too long ago. Again, going back to the sheriff's department. I won't go through all the stories, but it happens continuously, and we're also seeing it with innocent victims that of folks. And we're closing prisons down, and we've got like 3 prisons to be closed down in the next year here in California. And by the way, it's not because we're building new prisons, and it's not because we have room in other prisons, and we're literally putting criminals back out on the street. Again, without beating this up and getting on like and griping about it, the point being, getting out there and being active in your communities, whether it is trying to be active politically, getting into city council, getting into, your local municipal, county's government offices or whatnot. Another thing might be just preparing people and training people or making people aware, starting with that. I think, again, people are problem aware. They get there's an issue out there, but they don't know what to do next. They don't know what the solution could be for them. And I think there's a large gap between being problem aware and solution aware. And it takes folks like you or whoever, and I'd like to think, we contribute to that at some level in getting the word out and the message out that there are solutions, and it's not the same one for everybody. Like, these are individualized solutions based on your own personal needs, comfort levels, and whatever else. But more importantly, that there's people out there to help you. And they come in all shapes, sizes, forms, walks of life with all different backgrounds, which again is, and that gets you that much closer to maybe finding the right solution to, for you, for your family, for your safety, for your peace of mind, whatever the case is, so you don't wind up a victim or worrying or living a life worried about becoming a victim. So again, that was the major emphasis for having you on the show, was to kind of walk through who you are in that space. And you're kind of doing it all, which I applaud you for. I think it's amazing. I'm excited about the book that's coming out. I'm certain, again, like I said before, you'll probably win some friends and influence some people in the town. Continue to do that in the town that you live in. If people want to find out more about you and follow you and get their hands on the book when it's finally out, where do they go? What's the best way to find out more?
All right. I would say on Instagram, it's high-caliber_NC. I switched that from OC. Now I'm in the NC. And then I have a website. It's highcaliberoc.com. So keeping it with both coasts, I guess you could say.
Okay. So we talked about what you're doing on the social media side of things. Talk to me about what I'm going to find when I go to the website. What's there?
Website would be classes. And it's going to talk about, I do this really fun class. It's called Sip and the Second, where we go to a coffee shop and I bring all my guns to the coffee shop and it's just all dummy rounds and we drink our coffee and our tea. And then I just do a whole safety briefing and I have the girls load and we work on the sight alignment. So there's that class. And we talk about ladies' night on the website right now. I talk about, just kind of cool news articles about how firearms really helped females in real life. And there's just a little bio about myself too. So that's what you could find. And there's a gallery. So I got to add more. Got tons of pictures of everybody shooting.
I think that this, would you say sip and what? What's it called?
Sip and the Second. So Sip and the Second Amendment.
Oh, got
a bunch
you.
of ladies. Yeah.
So let me understand this right. So you guys are in the coffee. You guys are in the coffee shop with dummy rounds.
Imagine a Californian.
And this is okay.
Yes, I thought they were.
Sounds wild.
I threw out the idea that I thought for sure they would be like, "Get out of here, never come back." But they're like, "Oh, we definitely support the Second Amendment." So there is a little back area, so people walking in are like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" Kind of thrown off, what did I just walk into? But it's been really great.
I think it's great.
I think it's a good way to
I think we need to have more sip in the second. Meetings going on everywhere. Hopefully you can start a trend there. It sounds amazing. Listen, Heather, I just want to thank you so much for your time and for what you're doing out there. As a person that is always trying to spread the message and help people find their way through the journey, just like I am and have been for a long, long time. I'm always grateful for the time that they give me because I always learn something, and I always value that time. And hopefully this message reaches a lot of other people and can do the same for them. So thank you so much for joining us today and coming on.
Well, thank you. I'm a huge fan of your podcast, and I love all of your everyone that you've interviewed, and I feel very humble to be a part of that. So I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Next time you're in California, maybe it's on that book tour, maybe we see one another SHOT Show, something like that. I would love to connect in person and shake hands, maybe grab some coffee or something like that. So in the meantime, take care of yourself, keep doing what you're doing, and take care.
Thank you. You too.